All right. Of course, Clemson lost its ACC championship hold this past season in 2021 for the first time since 2014. For me and others, though, if you were watching football at the end of the year, they looked like the best team. So here they come back in 2022. The ACC has just released the schedule for the conference. Let's run through it here, Jason. So this has happened a few times in recent years where right out of the gate, it's right into the ACC in a rival game in Atlanta against Georgia Tech.
Yeah, it's not going to be quite the same. Not opening against the top, you're not opening against a top 5 opponent like Clemson did with Georgia last year. So you don't have to be 100%. I shouldn't even say it like that because it's not going to come off right. But you don't have that marquee matchup right out of the gate in week 1. Georgia Tech played Clemson tough last year, though, but so did most of the teams on the schedule. Monday night Labor Day game in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I've never been to there yet. I'm kind of looking forward to making that trip.
There you go. Then a couple games that should be those type of games that you work out the kinks. You figure out some alignments. You figure out the rotations along the offensive line and linebacker and maybe some other units across the field with Furman and Louisiana Tech. Then back into ACC play with a key game at Wake Forest, who, of course, despite Clemson winning by 3 touchdowns against Wake, was able to steal away the division championship.
Yeah, I've seen some Clemson fans online saying they, and just early talk about the schedule, thinking Wake Forest might be one of those tough matchups for Clemson next season. But I don't know. I just think this Wake Forest offense is a bad matchup for Clemson from the Wake Forest perspective. It's just not a good matchup for the Demon Deacons. They don't have a ton of success against that aggressive Clemson defensive front. Just too much speed. To me, on paper, that's a mismatch, and it's I don't know. Like I said, I just think that's a really good matchup for Clemson when you look not only just talent but that offense that Wake Forest runs. Matches up really well for Clemson, what they do on defense.
Yeah, well, Clemson wasn't scoring against anybody. They were in the 20-point range against everybody, and then Wake Forest shows up, and that seemed to be the cure. And even though Wake Forest was a good matchup on their perspective against just about everybody else in the conference, yeah, they still seem to get overwhelmed by Clemson. So Wake Forest with Sam Hartman back, I noticed that their recruiting class, not that this is going to factor into the 22 game, but was 75th in the country. So Dave Clawson continues to do miracles there in Winston-Salem and turn, 75th ranked recruiting classes into like 8-4 teams. So
it's amazing. It's amazing he doesn't get talked about, for some of these other jobs that open up because he does a heck of a job there at Wake Forest with what he's got to work with.
Absolutely, he does. I think he's one of the very best. A coach who's turned it around to a certain extent in the ACC, because I have been on him for years because he was working on like year 8 with a 38% winning percentage in the conference that once you factor in all the James Madison and East Carolina wins outside of the conference, they make it to bowl games. But now, over the last 2 years, 8-3, 9-3 for North Carolina State. And of course, they knocked off Clemson, and that's coming back to Death Valley this October.
Yeah, now see, this is probably the big ACC matchup for Clemson next season. North Carolina State, that was a pretty solid team they had last season. And they're bringing most of those guys back, bringing that quarterback back. And they finally got that monkey off their back and beat Clemson last season. They're gonna have to do something next year that they hadn't done in a long time again, which is win in Death Valley. It's been a long time since they've done that, and I think that could be one of the better games in the ACC next season. Because, I think I told you multiple times this season, I thought North Carolina State was a 10-win team potentially last year. I'm feeling that way about him already again next season. I know a lot of Clemson fans aren't big fans of Dave Dorn, but he's doing some good things there with that program in North Carolina State. And this is going to be a big game. This is one of the ones I would have circled on the calendar right now.
I think it's the best quarterback league in the country, despite some of the other issues the ACC's had in winning against the other 4 conferences the last few years. Now, Kenny Pickett's gone, Sam Howell's gone, but you mentioned Devin Leary, 35 touchdowns, only 5 picks, one of the best in the country, coming back for NC State. Then we'll group together the next 3 weeks. You can pick these off however you'd like. At Boston College, at Florida State, Syracuse before a bye week. You know, the Boston College game was a game that Clemson had to put together a stop in the red zone right at the end of the game. They should have probably won that game by a few scores, but they made a ton of mistakes. But still, they had to make a stop in the red zone to win the Boston College game. The Florida State game was a tussle. There was a turnover with about 4 minutes left that put Clemson behind the 8 ball, but they were able to put together a late touchdown to win that one at home. And the Syracuse game was even a struggle to a 17-14. That figure comes to mind in that one on like a Friday night. So you can't take any of them for granted. But if Clemson, of course, can improve the offense, then they're certainly better than these 3.